Have you ever felt the weight of silence pressing against your spirit? That moment when every word seems too heavy, every sentence carries too much responsibility, and something deep within whispers that perhaps it's time to simply listen. If you've been experiencing an unusual pull toward quietude lately, if conversations feel draining and solitude feels sacred, then what I'm about to share with you isn't coincidence. You're here because heaven has been orchestrating this moment. The divine realm has been preparing your heart for a message that will transform how you understand spiritual communication. Today, you'll discover why the Most High is asking His chosen ones to embrace holy silence, and why your willingness to stop talking might be the very key that unlocks the next level of your spiritual assignment. First reason, your words are being weighed in the heavenly courts right now. As you listen to these words, there's a divine accounting taking place. Every syllable you've spoken in recent weeks has been recorded not just in earthly memory, but in the sacred scrolls of heaven. The angels assigned to your journey have been meticulously documenting the spiritual weight of your conversations, and what they've discovered might surprise you. Your words, chosen one, carry frequencies that ripple through dimensions you cannot see. When you speak from a place of spiritual awakening, your voice becomes a tuning fork that either harmonizes with divine frequency or creates discord in the spiritual realm. The Father has been observing patterns in your speech, noticing when your words align with His purposes and when they drift into territories that don't serve your highest calling. Think of it this way. Imagine a master violinist preparing for the most important performance of their career. They don't practice scales carelessly or tune their instrument haphazardly. Every note matters. Every vibration must be perfect. This is exactly what's happening in your spiritual life right now. Heaven is fine-tuning your communication abilities, but first, you must learn the sacred art of spiritual silence. The prophet Isaiah understood this principle when he wrote about the Lord's servant. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. This wasn't about weakness, it was about divine wisdom, knowing when silence serves God's purposes better than speech. Consider this: when you speak constantly, you're like a radio that never stops broadcasting. But how can you receive heaven's transmission if your spiritual frequency is always occupied with outgoing signals? The divine realm has been waiting for you to create space, to allow moments of holy quietude where celestial messages can flow through your consciousness without interference. The seraphim surrounding God's throne have been taking notes on your spiritual development. They've witnessed your growth, your struggles, your victories, and your setbacks. What they've noticed is that your most profound spiritual breakthroughs have occurred not during your most eloquent prayers or passionate declarations, but during those quiet moments when you simply existed in divine presence, without feeling the need to fill the silence with words. There's a reason why the Psalms speak of being still and knowing that He is God. This isn't passive inactivity, it's active spiritual discipline. When you choose silence over speech, you're making a declaration to the universe that you trust God's timing, His methods, and His plans more than your own ability to talk your way through challenges. The ancient Hebrew word for wait also means to be silent and to hope. When you wait on the Lord in silence, you're not just pausing, you're positioning yourself to receive divine intelligence that transcends human understanding. Your silence becomes a form of worship, a sacrifice of your need to control conversations and outcomes. Practice this for the next 3 days before speaking in any significant conversation. Pause for 3 heartbeats. Ask yourself, are these words going to elevate or complicate? You'll be amazed at how often silence becomes your most powerful response. The angels assigned to your communication will begin to smile as they watch you choose wisdom over impulse, divine timing over human urgency. Second reason, the enemy has been studying your speech. Pattern shears something that might send chills down your spine. The adversary has been listening to every word you speak, not just the obvious ones, but the subtle complaints, the casual doubts, the throwaway comments that you think don't matter. Dark forces have been building a profile of your spiritual vulnerabilities based on your speech patterns, and they've been using this information to craft specific attacks against your peace and purpose. When you constantly verbalize your fears, you're essentially providing the enemy with a roadmap to your weaknesses. Every time you speak negatively about your circumstances, you're giving dark forces permission to amplify those very circumstances. But here's the beautiful truth. When you embrace strategic silence, you become spiritually invisible to these negative influences. Picture the scenario. A young woman named Sarah had been struggling with financial challenges for months. She talked about her problems to everyone, friends, family, even strangers at the grocery store. She didn't realize that each conversation was like dropping breadcrumbs for spiritual opposition to follow. The more she spoke about lack, the more lack manifested in her experience. One evening, during her prayer time, she felt a strong impression to stop discussing her financial situation with others. For 30 days, she committed to speaking only words of faith and gratitude about her resources. She didn't lie or pretend, she simply chose silence over complaint. By the end of that month, 3 unexpected financial opportunities had presented themselves, and she understood that her breakthrough had come not through speaking, but through strategic spiritual silence. The book of Proverbs reminds us even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. But this isn't about appearing wise to others, it's about becoming wise in the eyes of heaven. When you stop giving the enemy access to your inner world through careless speech, you create a protective barrier around your spiritual journey. The angels assigned to your protection have been working overtime to shield you from attacks that you've inadvertently invited through negative speech patterns. They've been longing for you to recognize that silence isn't emptiness. It's strategic warfare against forces that want to derail your divine assignment. Consider how military strategists value classified information. They understand that revealing plans to the enemy, even accidentally, can compromise entire operations. Your spiritual journey is equally strategic. The enemy has been eavesdropping on your conversations, learning your patterns, studying your reactions, and formulating countermeasures against your spiritual progress. But when you embrace holy silence, you're essentially going into spiritual stealth mode. The adversary cannot attack what he cannot locate. Your silence becomes a form of divine camouflage, making you invisible to spiritual radar systems designed to track and target God's chosen ones. The prophet Nehemiah understood this principle when he was rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. When his enemies asked about his plans, he responded with strategic silence and divine focus. He didn't feel obligated to explain his methods or justify his mission. He simply continued the work while maintaining spiritual vigilance against opposition. This doesn't mean you become secretive or dishonest. It means you become selective about what you share, when you share it, and with whom you share it. Not every thought needs to be vocalized. Not every struggle needs to be discussed. Not every victory needs to be announced immediately. Your guardian angels have been waiting for you to understand that silence can be your strongest weapon against spiritual interference. When you stop broadcasting your every move, emotion, and intention, you create space for divine strategy to operate without enemy intelligence gathering information about your next steps. Third reason, heaven is preparing a prophetic download. Something extraordinary is about to happen in your spiritual journey, but it requires you to create internal space for divine reception. The Most High has been preparing a prophetic download, specifically for you, visions, dreams, revelations, and supernatural insights that will revolutionize your understanding of your purpose. But here's the crucial part. This download cannot occur while your spiritual channels are cluttered with constant chatter. Think of your consciousness like a computer that's been running too many programs simultaneously. Eventually, it slows down, becomes unresponsive, and can't process new information efficiently. Your spiritual consciousness operates similarly. When you're constantly speaking, analyzing, explaining, and verbalizing every thought, you're consuming the very mental and spiritual bandwidth that heaven needs to transmit divine revelations. The prophet Daniel understood this principle. Before receiving his most profound visions, he engaged in periods of fasting and silence. He didn't just abstain from food, he abstained from unnecessary speech, creating a sacred space where divine communication could flow unobstructed. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood two others, one on this side of the bank of the river, and one on the other side. One of them said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, "How long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled right now?" Heaven is positioning you for your own Daniel moment, a time when the veil between the natural and supernatural becomes thin, when divine mysteries are revealed with stunning clarity. But this revelation requires what I call prophetic silence, the discipline of quieting your human commentary so that divine commentary can emerge. The archangels assigned to prophetic ministry have been circling your spiritual atmosphere, waiting for the right moment to begin the download process. They've been observing your spiritual maturity, measuring your ability to handle divine secrets, and assessing your readiness to receive information that will change the trajectory of your life. Imagine a master painter working on their greatest masterpiece. They don't constantly explain their process to observers. They work in focused silence, allowing their creativity to flow without interruption. The creator is painting something magnificent on the canvas of your life, but he needs you to stop providing commentary on every brushstroke. Trust the process, embrace the silence, and prepare to be amazed by what emerges. During these coming weeks, you may notice an increase in dreams, sudden insights during quiet moments, or an unusual ability to sense spiritual atmospheres. These are signs that the prophetic download is beginning. Don't talk about every detail immediately. Let the revelations marinate in your spirit first. Some divine messages are meant to be treasured in silence before they're shared with the world. Mary, the mother of Jesus, understood this principle. When the angel Gabriel appeared to her with the most significant announcement in human history, she didn't immediately run to tell everyone. The scripture says she pondered these things in her heart. She understood that some divine communications require internal processing before external expression. You're entering a season where heaven will begin speaking to you in ways you've never experienced before. The Father has been preparing your spiritual receptors for downloads that will contain blueprints for your divine assignment, strategies for overcoming obstacles, and insights that will position you for supernatural breakthrough. But these downloads require silence to receive properly. Just as you can't hear a whisper in a noisy room, you can't receive divine whispers when your spiritual atmosphere is cluttered with constant conversation. The angels of revelation have been waiting for you to create the internal stillness necessary for celestial transmission. Fourth reason, your spiritual sensitivity is being amplified. The Father has been working behind the scenes to increase your spiritual sensitivity. But this process requires a recalibration of your entire communication system. When you speak constantly, you're functioning primarily from your mental and emotional centers. But when you embrace purposeful silence, you begin operating from your spiritual center, the place where divine discernment, supernatural wisdom, and heavenly insights originate. Consider how a skilled musician can detect subtle changes in pitch that untrained ears cannot perceive. Their sensitivity has been developed through years of focused listening, not constant playing. Similarly, your spiritual sensitivity is being refined through seasons of sacred silence. The more you practice holy quietude, the more you'll begin to perceive frequencies from the divine realm that were previously drowned out by the noise of constant conversation. Here's a powerful truth. Every time you choose silence over speech, you're making a declaration to the spiritual realm that you value heaven's voice more than your own. This act of humility sends ripples through the angelic realm, and the seraphim assigned to your spiritual development take note. They begin to increase their activity around you, knowing that you're becoming capable of receiving more sophisticated divine communications. Let me share a symbolic story that illustrates this principle. There was once a shepherd who spent his days in the hills watching over his flock. Initially, he would sing loudly to pass the time, talk to himself, and call out constantly to his sheep. But over time, he began to notice that his constant noise was actually making the sheep more nervous and scattered. The wilderness seemed to rebel against his chatter. One day, he decided to experiment with silence. He spent an entire day shepherding without speaking unless absolutely necessary. What he discovered amazed him. In the silence, he could hear the approach of predators long before they became visible. He could sense changes in weather patterns through subtle shifts in wind direction. He could perceive the emotional state of his sheep through their breathing and movement patterns. His effectiveness as a shepherd increased dramatically, not through more communication, but through enhanced spiritual sensitivity born from strategic silence. This is exactly what's happening in your spiritual journey. The Good Shepherd is teaching you to become more sensitive to the subtle movements of His Spirit, the whispered guidance of divine wisdom, and the gentle nudges of angelic assistance. But this sensitivity can only develop in the fertile ground of chosen silence. Your nervous system is being rewired for spiritual perception. The constant noise of human conversation creates a kind of spiritual static that interferes with your ability to detect divine frequencies. When you embrace periods of holy silence, you're essentially cleaning the spiritual static from your reception system, allowing for clearer communication with the divine realm. The prophet Elijah discovered this truth when he was hiding in the cave. God didn't speak to him through the wind, the earthquake, or the fire. He spoke through a still, small voice. But Elijah could only perceive this gentle divine whisper because he had learned to recognize it through previous experiences of spiritual silence. Pay attention to this. In the coming days, you may find yourself naturally gravitating toward quieter environments, feeling uncomfortable with excessive noise or chaotic conversations. This isn't antisocial behavior, it's spiritual maturation. Your system is being recalibrated to operate at a higher frequency, and part of that process involves learning to treasure silence. As a sacred gift, the angels assigned to your spiritual development have been working to increase your sensitivity to divine presence. They've been fine-tuning your spiritual receptors, adjusting your internal frequency to match heaven's transmission wavelength. But this delicate work requires periods of silence, where their adjustments can take effect without interference. You may begin to notice that you can sense people's spiritual conditions before they speak, that you can perceive the spiritual atmosphere of rooms before others identify it, or that you can detect divine timing in situations where others see only coincidence. These are signs that your spiritual sensitivity is being amplified through your willingness to embrace purposeful silence. Fifth reason, you are being prepared for a divine assignment that requires spiritual authority. The most profound reason heaven is calling you to embrace silence is that you're being prepared for a divine assignment that will require unprecedented spiritual authority. True authority in the kingdom of heaven isn't established through eloquent speech or persuasive arguments. It's forged in the crucible of holy silence, where character is refined and divine wisdom is internalized. Every great spiritual leader throughout history has understood that their most powerful communications emerged from seasons of profound silence. Moses spent 40 days in silence on Mount Sinai before receiving the 10 Commandments. Jesus regularly withdrew to lonely places to pray in silence. The Apostle Paul spent 3 years in the Arabian desert, learning to hear God's voice away from the noise of religious culture. You are being prepared for something similar. The assignment that awaits you will require you to speak with divine authority, to deliver messages that carry heaven's weight, and to communicate truths that transform lives. But this level of spiritual authority cannot be manufactured through human effort or learned through traditional education. It must be birthed in the sacred space of silence, where your human agenda dies and divine purpose is born. Think of it this way. A blacksmith doesn't create a sword by constantly hammering metal. The metal must first be heated in the fire, then shaped through precise, calculated strikes, followed by periods of cooling and tempering. Your spiritual character is currently in the fire of divine silence, being heated and shaped for a specific purpose. The constant hammering of speech would actually weaken the metal of your character, but strategic silence allows divine fire to do its perfect work. The enemy has been trying to convince you that silence equals powerlessness, that you must constantly defend yourself, explain your actions, and justify your journey. But this is a lie designed to keep you from accessing the profound spiritual authority that emerges from holy quietude. When you learn to rest in silence, trusting that God is your defender and advocate, you begin to operate with the same quiet confidence that characterized Jesus throughout his ministry. The apostles learned this principle during their time with Jesus. Initially, they were quick to speak, eager to demonstrate their understanding, and ready to defend their position. But after spending 3 years observing Jesus' strategic use of silence, they began to understand that true spiritual authority often communicates more through what isn't said than through what is said. Consider how Jesus responded to his accusers. During his trial, he didn't defend himself with elaborate arguments or passionate speeches. His silence spoke louder than any words could have. Pilate was amazed by this response because he had never encountered someone who possessed such spiritual authority that they didn't need to defend themselves through speech. Here's a practical application. In your daily interactions, begin to notice how often you feel compelled to explain yourself, justify your decisions, or defend your choices. These compulsions often stem from insecurity rather than divine prompting. Practice responding to criticism, questions, or challenges with thoughtful silence rather than reactive speech. You'll discover that silence often communicates more authority than 1,000 words ever could. Your upcoming assignment will require you to speak into situations where your words carry the weight of divine backing. People will recognize that when you speak, heaven is speaking through you. But this level of spiritual authority can only be achieved by those who have learned to treasure silence as much as speech, who understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. The angels assigned to your ministry have been preparing the hearts of people who will need to hear your voice in the coming season. But first, they need to know that your voice has been purified in the fire of divine silence, that your words have been tested in the crucible of holy quietude, and that when you speak, it's because heaven has given you something specific to say. Authority in the kingdom of heaven is measured not by how much you can say, but by how much you choose not to say. It's demonstrated not through your ability to win arguments, but through your willingness to trust God's vindication. It's established not through self-promotion, but through self-restraint guided by divine wisdom. The leaders heaven is raising up in this season will be known for their profound depth, their spiritual sensitivity, and their ability to speak with authority because they've learned to live with humility. They will be comfortable with silence because they've learned that their identity isn't dependent on being heard, but on being obedient to divine timing and instruction. Your assignment is coming. Chosen one, the platform is being prepared, the audience is being assembled, and the message is being downloaded. But the final preparation requires you to master the art of sacred silence, to become comfortable with the weight of divine authority, and to trust that when heaven gives you something to say, you'll know it not through human urgency, but through spiritual certainty. As we conclude this sacred conversation, I want you to understand that the silence heaven is calling you to embrace isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's not about becoming mute or withdrawn from the world. It's about becoming so spiritually sensitive that you speak only when divinely prompted. And when you do speak, your words carry the fragrance of heaven itself. The next time you feel that familiar pull toward quietude, don't resist it. Don't feel guilty about declining conversations that drain your spiritual energy. Don't apologize for needing more solitude than others seem to require. You're not becoming antisocial, you're becoming spiritually mature. Remember this truth: the most profound communications in the kingdom of heaven often happen in perfect silence. Your heart speaking to the Father's heart, your spirit communing with the Holy Spirit, your soul receiving downloads from the angelic realm. These sacred exchanges require the kind of internal stillness that can only be achieved when you stop talking and start truly listening. The Father has been waiting for this moment when you would finally understand that silence isn't empty space to be filled, but sacred space to be treasured. Your willingness to embrace holy quietude is a sign of spiritual maturity that makes the angels of heaven rejoice. They've been watching your journey, celebrating your growth, and preparing for the moment when you would finally trust divine timing over human urgency. If this message has stirred something deep within your spirit, if you recognize yourself in these words, then comment "I am listening" below and subscribe to receive more prophetic insights specifically designed for God's chosen ones. Your willingness to embrace holy silence is a sign that you're ready for the next level of your spiritual journey. May the peace that surpasses all understanding guard your heart and mind As you learn to treasure the sacred gift of divine silence, the Father is pleased with your willingness to listen, and heaven is preparing to respond in ways that will exceed your greatest expectations. The conversation between you and the divine realm is about to reach a new level of intimacy and power. Are you ready to stop talking and start receiving? The answer to that question will determine the trajectory of your spiritual journey. In the months ahead, listen carefully. Chosen one, heaven is about to speak,